Well, hello and happy Friday. You made it through another awesome week. Good job. High five, right? Yes. Are you tired? Are you yawning? Oh my goodness. Well, let's snuggle up, get your blanket, hop in your bed, and let's read one of my favorite stories. This one is called The Old Woman Who Named Things, and the author is Cynthia Rylant. Now, I don't know if you can tell what's on the cover of this book, but there's a little bitty puppy dog. How many of you guys have a puppy dog or a kitty cat at your house? You do? I do too. We are making good connections tonight. Let's find out just exactly how this puppy dog is in this story. You ready? Let's do it. Once there was an old woman who loved to name things. She named the car she drove Betsy. She named the old chair she sat in Fred. She named her old bed that she slept on Roxanne. And she named her old house Franklin. Do you name things? Does your car have a name? My car doesn't have a name. I'll have to work on that. Every morning, she would get out of Roxanne, have a cup of cocoa in Fred, lock up Franklin, and drive to the post office in Betsy. She always hoped for a letter from someone, but all she ever got was bills. Do you know what a bill is? That's right. It's when we have to pay for things like electricity or water. That's what a bill is. So she had bills too. You see, the reason the old woman never got any letters was because she had outlived every single one of her friends, and this worried her. She didn't like the idea of being the lonely old woman without any friends, without anyone whom she could call by name. It's kind of sad, isn't it? So she began to name things, but she only named on those things that she knew she could never outlive. Her car, Betsy, had more get up and go than anything around, and her chair, Fred, had never sagged a day in his life. Not one creak or moan had she ever heard out of her old bed, Roxanne. And as for her house, Franklin, it had been standing straight for over 100 years. Yes, 100. And it didn't look a day past 20. The old woman never worried about outliving any of them, and her days were very happy. Then one day, when the old woman was out soaping some mud off Betsy. Okay, that's a strange way to say soaping some mud off Betsy. So Betsy was the car. What is she doing with the car? That's right, she's washing it. So that's a different way to say washing. She was soaping some mud off Betsy, telling her that Franklin wouldn't want to be seen with a car that didn't keep its bumper a little cleaner. Here came a shy, brown puppy right up to the old woman's gate. The old woman had not named the gate because two of its hinges had rusted, and she could tell the gate wasn't long for this world. She was going to have to replace it. That shy, brown little puppy wagged its little tail. It looked a little hungry. The old woman stood beside Betsy and just watched that puppy for a while. She said. I wonder what she's thinking. What would you be thinking? Would you want to feed it? Yeah, me too. Let's see. Then she walked into Franklin, got a chunk of ham from her refrigerator, and came back outside. The old woman gave the ham to the hungry puppy and told it to go home. She told it that Betsy always made puppies sick and Fred never allowed puppies to sit on him, and Roxanne wasn't wide enough for a puppy and an old woman to fit on. And besides all this, Franklin couldn't tolerate dog hair. So the puppy went away. That makes me sad. Does it make you sad? Let's find out what happens. But that next day, that puppy was back. The old woman was sitting in Fred reading a book on everlasting flowers when she saw the puppy through her window. Go home, she called to the puppy. The puppy wagged its tail when he saw her. Go home, she called again. But the puppy just kept wagging. And the old woman noticed that it still looked a little hungry. So she went to her refrigerator. She gave the puppy a hunk of cheese and 2 biscuits. Then she told it to go home. And the puppy went. Are you feeling the need for a snack? Yes. That sounds good. That night, as the old woman plumped up the pillow on Roxanne, she thought about that puppy. It was a very nice puppy. It was a very pretty puppy. But it could not stay. If it stayed, she would have to give it a name. And it could never last as long as Franklin or Fred or Betsy or Roxanne. And she might outlive it. And she didn't want to risk that. She didn't want to outlive any more of her friends. She would just keep telling it to go home. Would you tell the puppy to go home? You wouldn't. Me neither. Every day, the shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate, and every day she fed it and told it to go home. Always it went away, and always it came back the very next day. This went on for many, many months. The puppy got bigger and bigger until soon it wasn't a puppy anymore. It was a dog, and it was still a dog with no name. In all this time, the old woman had gotten a new dresser that she had named Bill, a new wheelbarrow that she had named Francine, and a new concrete pig for her garden that she had named Bud. But the dog she faithfully fed at her gate each and every day still had no name. And since it had no name, the old woman didn't have to worry about outliving it. And she thought herself pretty clever for this. But then, one day, the shy brown dog did not come. She sat in Fred and watched the gate all day long, but he never came. The old woman felt sad. The next day again, the dog did not come. The old woman drove Betsy around town looking for the dog, but she did not find it. The old woman felt even sadder. I would be sad too. Would you be sad? You would? Yeah, I can understand that. The following day, when the dog still did not come, the old woman knew she had to do something. She picked up her telephone and called the dog catcher. Have you caught any shy brown dogs? the old woman asked the dog catcher. We've got a whole kennel full of shy brown dogs, ma'am, said the dog catcher. Was yours wearing a collar with a name on it? No, said the old woman sadly, and she hung up the phone. The old woman sat and thought about the shy brown dog who had no collar and no name. Wherever it was, no one would know that it was supposed to come to the old woman's gate every day, that she was supposed to feed it and to tell it to go home every day, that things were always supposed to be in this way. The shy brown dog had no collar and no name, and no one would ever be able to know these things about it. Right then, that old woman made a decision. She locked up Franklin and drove Betsy to the dog catcher's kennel. She said to that dog catcher, I've come to find my dog. He asked her what color it was. It's brown, she said. He asked her how old it was. About a year, she said. Then he asked her what its name was. The old woman thought a moment. She thought of all the old dear friends with names whom she had outlived. She saw their smiling faces and remembered their lovely names, and she thought about how lucky she had been to have known these friends. She thought what a lucky woman she was. My dog's name is Lucky, she told the dog catcher. He led her to a big yard full of white dogs and black dogs and brown dogs. And the old woman looked and looked and looked, and finally she saw her own shy brown dog sitting beside a gate. The dog was looking at Betsy, parked in the driveway. The old woman called out, Here, Lucky! Here, Lucky! And at the sound of her voice, the shy brown dog came running. And from that day on, Lucky lived with the old woman, and he always came when his name was called. It turned out that Betsy didn't make all dogs sick, and Fred was happy to allow a dog to sit on him. Franklin really didn't mind a little dog hair. And every night, Roxanne, the bed, was sure to make herself plenty white enough for a shy, brown, lucky dog, and the old woman who named him. You know what? That woman, she was lucky because she was blessed by the dog Lucky, and she had a friend. And I bet you have so many blessings too that God has given to you. Before you go to bed tonight, why don't you say a prayer thanking God for all of the many blessings that He has given to you and your family. We'll see you next week. Hope you have a good weekend. Remember that we love you at Triad, but remember, God loves you too and has a great plan for your life.